We're going to get started. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'd like to welcome everybody to the November 15th regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We have the meeting called to order at 7:01. Can the recording secretary please conduct roll?
Commissioner Kuznick,
Here.
Commissioner Marks,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards,
Here.
and Chair Alpert.
Here, item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4, public comment or written communications. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a green speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to the recording secretary. If you are participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. Do we have any late communications?
2 late communication items received from Susan Ferris Intercom and Jim Blickenstaff are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. And I have 1 speaker card received from Greg Carr.
Okay. Hi, Greg.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Carr, San Ramon resident for some time. I'm going to beg your indulgence to allow me to say something not connected to planning. It's uncommon for me to do things like that, but in my family, today's a special day. My grandson, God, don't get old, you get emotional. My grandson, Enzo Ryan Keller, has been free of cancer for 3 years. For some of you who know of it, as Gary does, because he's their next door neighbor, it was pretty bad. And I only bring it up to hold it up to the audience and to all of you that there is a paucity of funding in this country spent on childhood cancers. It's somewhere around under 5% of what the country spends on cancer research. Less than 5% is spent on pediatric childhood cancers. So we should be planning to get that to be a larger number instead of a little small thing size of a nickel. Anyway, I urge people that hear this or see this, if their child is exhibiting symptoms that they can't explain and that the pediatricians say, oh, well, it's just a sinus infection, just take some antibiotics in this. Well, that's what happened. And my grandson almost died. He was within a couple of days of passing. It was that bad. So I don't hope any of you or anybody seeing this ever has to try that on for size. It's very painful. I would urge you, though, keep an eye on your child, take him in, and if you're not satisfied with what you're hearing, in the case of my grandson, after 3 weeks of complete misdiagnosis by 2 pediatricians, have the courage that my daughter does. She's kind of like me. She didn't stand around and let the moss grow under her feet. They took her right down to Children's, and that's when they got the bad news. But he was taken care of with massive doses of chemo, and he's still with us. So all you who have children, be careful, because what he had was, it was called Burkitt's lymphoma, very rare. Only about 150 kids get it each year here in the country. And it expands. The tumors double in size every 24 hours. And his was this large between his ears, and he was a little kid. He was 4 years old. So that's what I have to say. And Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. And I'll tell you, it's a pleasure to see him out there running on the park in the driveway and playing in the street now. So thank you. Are there any other speaker cards?
No.
Okay, do we have anybody on Zoom with their hands raised?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and how many do we have raised?
Just one right now.
Okay, we'll stick with 3 minutes then. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi there, we can.
Oh, hi. I just want to summarize the comments I made earlier, very briefly. I just basically has to do with the master plan on the marketplace. General plan says it's an essential component of planning for this kind of site. It entitles you to proceed with the master plan, yet it's been ignored to a great extent by staff and the planning people. And it really is essential because without a master plan, you're sort of going without a plan. And that's kind of crazy with a site that's so valuable to the community. And it served the community quite well under mixed use. It had a successful market there with a successful grocery store. And now with this short-sighted and piecemeal type of development that's being planned for and presented to the Planning Commission by staff, you really have a way of kind of destroying any opportunities for making that a site that works for the community. And that's kind of sad. And it's not necessary. So I think you need to re-examine how you proceed with this. Reassert your legislative authority that you have that's been somewhat compromised by planning staff recently. Need to affirm that and then move forward urgently because timing is very important on this to plan for this under a master plan, which will guide it toward a look at the future and what's best interest of the citizens, the community in that area, and what's best interest long-term for the city in terms of your growth and in terms of the 10,000 plus people that are moving into that area. So I think for smart planning, for responsible planning, you need the master plan as a tool to guide you on that and also to serve the interest of your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have any other speakers on through this time?
Not right now.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and close the public comment? Okay, additions and revisions to tonight's agenda. We do not have any at this time. And item 6, consent calendar, we do not have any. And item 7, the approval of the minutes, and these will be the minutes from the October 18th, 2022 meeting that we had revisions made, and the last meeting, which was November the 1st. And recording secretary, do we have any comments, late communications on this item?
Yes, we received one late communication from Ariel Strauss with Greenfire Law for item 7.1. And for item 7.2, we received a late communication from Robert Klingner. Sorry, I do have a speaker card for item 7.2 for Robert Klingner.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and open public comment on item 7.2?
Good evening. My name is Robert Klinger. I'm a resident of San Ramon. I sent something, a public comment to the Planning Commission, so I hope that you received my correspondence from 3 p.m. today. We spent a lot of time last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, talking about TrueMark, the development. And I had comments at the time, and I think the key item that I was talking about was the traffic on Deerwood Drive. And so when you, some of the planning commissioners have reminded me in the past, whenever people come forward and they speak, the planning commissioners really understand what they mean. It's you know, it's communication, but you folks understand, you get lots of comments and from lots of different viewpoints, but basically you sort of understand what the person is trying to say. So after I talked about Deerwood Drive at length, I think, for 3 minutes. I think Commissioner Albert had requested that we follow up on this and that we take action with regard to that. So when I saw the minutes, which we're talking about right now, there's no comments on there, or there's no confirmation that the request was made. And so I wanted to point that out. So when these minutes are discussed for approval or not approval, they should be corrected so that we know what the request was from the commissioner. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have any other comment cards for the minutes at this point?
No, not for these items.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and close public comment on this item? Discussion on the minutes. I'm satisfied on item 7.2 that they are summary minutes and the request will be followed through by staff at a subsequent meeting as discussed. So I don't see need to revise those minutes at this time. No comments. If we can get a motion to accept the minutes as presented in the packet. Green button. Okay, moved by Commissioner Wallace. Okay, and now we can.
Are we
vote.
moving to accept both sets of
Yeah, we
minutes?
are, but we're
Just
voting on them together.
Check.
Okay, passed 5-0-0-0. So minutes are accepted as put together. Okay, item 8, items continued after the close of public hearing. There are none. Item 9 is continue items. This is 9.1, the El Nido Senior Assisted Living Project Development Plan, and we have a staff report tonight by Cindy Yee.
Good evening, Commissioner and members of the public. I will be recusing myself from this project for the meantime, since I do have ownership of property in the area, but I will be returning for the conclusion of your agenda.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie.
Of course. All right, good evening. I'm going to just double check here. Yes, the clicker does work. Okay. So I'm here this evening to provide a brief presentation on item 9.1. It is. Okay, great. There it is. And the item before you is a development plan amendment application for project located at 19251 Ceremony Valley Boulevard at the corner of Westside Drive and Ceremony Valley Boulevard. Has a general plan designation of single family medium density and a West Side specific plan designation of medium density residential. It's a 0.7 acre project site. And just some photos of the existing property from the corner of Westside Drive and Ceremony Valley Boulevard looking south. So just a quick history on the background. Earlier this year in April, the Westside specific plan was amended to change the land use designation of this property to medium density residential. And then in May, the Planning Commission adopted resolution 06-22 approving a senior assisted living facility development proposal that included a development plan application, architecture review, land use permit, tree removal, and a initial study mitigated negative declaration application. In August of this year, the applicant filed an amendment to the approved development plan to modify the previously approved project. And so at the October 18th Planning Commission meeting, the applicant provided revised plans and the Planning Commission deferred public hearing to a future meeting to allow for renoticing, and also requested the Architecture Review Board review the proposed changes. So on October 24th, the applicant provided updated project plans. As you'll see in your packet, there is the same bed capacity as originally approved back in May, with 72 beds in now a total of 61 rooms. And so those plans were presented to the Architecture Review Board on October 26th. In general, the ARB supported the project changes, but did provide recommended modifications to enhance the design. Those are attached in the staff report as attachment D. On October 28th, the applicant provided revised plans in response to the ARB's comments. The applicant's list of plan revisions are also provided as an attachment to your staff report. And as a result, we then noticed the public hearing for this evening on November 4th to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. And then just to note, in terms of the CEQA analysis that was completed for this project, the environmental analysis was evaluated for consistency with the certified ISM&D that was previously prepared earlier this year. The project would not result in significant effects beyond those that were previously examined, and so no changed circumstances or new information that would cause any new significant impacts. Additionally, an architectural historian has reviewed the revised design and also concluded that the project redesign would not result in an increase in negative impacts to the historical aspects of the El Nido house. And so staff agreed that the ISM&D does cover the new project changes and would not have a negative impact. And so this table's in your staff report, but a comparison of the proposed plans that are in your packet from October 28th to the approved development plans that were approved back in May. Again, the same number of beds are proposed. There is one additional room that's used as a tandem room now with 2 beds inside, and they have shared facilities, but it's essentially a 2-bedroom configuration. Land use permits are reviewed based on number of beds. And so even with the change in rooms, the land use permit that was approved back in May would still cover the change in the number of rooms. The number of parking spaces still required to provide 39 based on the 72 beds that are proposed. The parking spaces provided did increase from 30 spaces to 31 spaces. And as you'll recall, the land use permit that was previously approved for the parking reduction would still apply to this project site. And so we see an increase in the additional availability of parking as part of the revised plans. There have been some floor area changes and square footage changes both to the El Nido home as well as the main building. So some increases there, about 1,000 square feet addition for both the El Nido and the main building. The proposed floor area ratio actually gets reduced from the original floor area ratio. There's a slight increase in total lot coverage, but as you recall, part of the adoption of the development plan, there were findings made in terms of significant public benefit. And so the ratios for floor area ratio and floor and lot coverage, the project still meets the maximum allowed for the site. And then just a summary of the key changes that have been made with this application. As I've pointed out, the El Nido house has some modifications and increase in about 1,000 square feet of additional floor area to accommodate the changes in the basement, as well as modifications to the administrative offices and the assisted living bedrooms on the second floor. The project still maintains 72 beds, but there is one additional room that's been added in the El Nido house. There's a variety of single and double bedroom configurations, and you'll see those in both the main building and the El Nido house as well. There are covered balconies that have been added to the second and third floor on the western elevation, and then a porch added on the south elevation. There are now 5 surface level parking spaces where there were originally in the plan identified 6. And then in the basement, there's now 26 basement level parking spaces where the previously approved plan showed 24. The applicant's also proposing to install an emergency generator that would go on the rooftop of the building. They've relocated the trash enclosure into the parking area to allow for better circulation for trash pickup. And then the connection to the El Nido House and the main building. There's now a connection on both the first story and the second story of the buildings. Previously, there was a breezeway that connected the two buildings together, and now you'll see that there's a prominent, like more prominent two-story element that connects those buildings. Briefly, there's a site plan drawing here. This footprint of the buildings remains in the same location, and so those in itself have not changed in terms of where the El Nido House structure was previously proposed and the main building structure was proposed. So primarily the same footprint as originally approved. There are some slight modifications to things like the patio area on the south elevation, as well as where the connection is now made between the two buildings, but some slight variations there, but primarily the footprint remains the same. And then as the Planning Commission requested the last meeting, there are elevations that show what was previously approved in May, and then the proposed elevations are shown on the in the drawing on the bottom part of the page. So I'll go through these really briefly. I know the applicant also has a presentation this evening as well, and he'll walk through a bit more of the changes that have been made to the building. Here's the north elevation, the south elevation, the west elevation. And then so for this evening, we would recommend opening the public hearing this evening, taking public testimony, closing the public hearing, and then providing feedback to staff on the proposed development plan amendment. If appropriate, we've included a resolution for your consideration this evening for approving the development plan application. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I can take questions now. I know or I can.
Why don't we
look
go
up
ahead and let the
applicants.
applicant speak first? And
Sure.
then we'll open it for our questions next.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to David Bogstad or Sohail Siddiqui first.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you again for addressing our concerns related to this project. I think, if I recall correctly, this is our 7th hearing in front of Planning Commission about this project. So I'm sure you guys are as fatigued as I am. But nonetheless, today we will talk about some of the changes we are introducing to this project and also sort of describe the rationale behind it. Most of these changes have come about as we started to sort of further progress on our business plan and started to engage with the prospective operators. One of the key elements that came up right away was that separating the dining facility into the house was just not practical, and we had to bring the dining facilities closer to where the residents are. So that actually sort of became the common denominator for all of the changes that you're seeing, with the exception of some of the patios we have added. And those, especially on the west elevation side, those patio requirements are sort of more industry requirement. I think we're obligated to provide sunlight and fresh air to the resident on respective floors. So that's the key reason. But in order for us to bring the dining into the main facility, we had to sort of shift our room around a little bit. Also, once we moved the dining facility out of the house, we had to figure out what is the most effective use of the house. We currently have 4 bedrooms on the second floor of the house, and we decided to make a use of them with slight modification by adding bathroom to each one of those rooms. So that's how we are still making a use of the house, moving the administrative offices downstairs on the ground floor, and that will become sort of the main reception area for us to have the sort of prospective residents come and visit our facility and get orientation and what have you. As you may recall, we have been going through a series of changes. One of the other key changes that took place between the last time you approved the project and now is we have changed our architect. Our previous architect basically resigned because he just didn't feel that he had the right industry knowledge. And he started to feel bad when we started to get feedback from the operators that the design is just not going to be practical. So as a result of that, LCA is our new architect. David Bogstad is here. He's going to walk you through some of the changes today. I'm here to answer any question you have, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just an introduction, David Boxdown, president of LCA Architects. We like to take over projects that are halfway there, half baked, but being able to put them together. Also, just a comment for you. You have an excellent, probably the most excellent design review board, the ARB members. I think they always take projects and help them be better. And so when you guys, when we met before you in October 18th, there was some confusion, some things that I think there's 3 design submittals, 3 doing that. We're here to clean this all up, make it beautiful, and do a great needed project for the community. I've lost 2 parents this year. These facilities are critical. And sometimes people say, oh, I don't want these, I don't want these. But when you have a parent that's sick and they need 24-hour care, it just becomes too much. And it's greatly needed for the community. I don't know if my parents' Providence did this, but this is really needed to be able to do that. So let me go quickly through here. We bought the model. Here's a model of the Heartland House, the El Nido, and just to be able to look at the details, look at every aspect, be able to model that, take some of these elements and put it in there. I think the ARB liked that idea to make that all work. And so we have that. This is the back end of the building in through there in the upper right-hand corner. So you see that, and we're going to put this model in the facility so people see the historical aspect. One of the things, I know we had the elevations in the building, but I think the 3D models really help you see this building. We added on the eaves, the sort of the El Nino trim, and we used brick. There was sort of brick in the building. We cleaned up the entry. We saved some of the trees. David Gates, one of the ARB members, said, hey guys, why don't you take the black fence and just paint it white? It will look better. And he was absolutely right. So we've done that. So I have a couple of views right here. Here's the farther view, the signage on the left. And you see this as a continual facility across here. And then another view along the street. So this is going to be a handsome, quiet facility. Unfortunately, for these facilities, you come here, they're very quiet. You have workers coming in here. Unfortunately, not too many people always visit their parents in here. So it's not that big of a traffic issue. So we've done this, we put the trash to the side. You don't even see it. It's on the other side of those cars. And so that helps in that way. You see the entrance and through there, the transition between the 2 buildings. So the white of the existing building with the cream of the new building, and more articulation of the building and thought through. On the sides, this doesn't show all of it because David Gates again said we should put some more trees along this edge. So we're going to do that. On this upper balcony, we're going to take glass because you don't want people climbing over the balconies because they will sometimes do silly things as they get older. We're just going to do etched glass. So it will let the light in, but they won't be able to view into their neighbor's yard. It won't be able to do that. So I thought that was a good suggestion and everything else. But this is a place for people to live out their last months, last years, and be able to do that. Again, this thing, the etched glass, and through here, the planting. This is a neighbor's view. Now, I took this from Google Earth, and flatten the houses, but it shows that we're going to put trees all the way across this edge. So within 5 years, you're going to have all these trees sort of cover it, and this is going to disappear from our neighbors. So we want to be a good neighbor. We want to do an attractive elevation, but this is the view from there. And then what everybody asked for previously in our October 18th meeting was, here's what was approved and here's what's new. You see a little more vegetation. We moved the generator on the roof so that it would save the tree on the right-hand lower corner and be able to do that, more sensitive to that, opening the building up. Here's the basement. We added the kitchen to the basement. Have a great kitchen designer. And then just going through the first floor, and you see that going through our more cleaned up plan. This is code ready to be discussed, going through there. And then I think this was, and then the roof, and then we're gonna make this, back one. Solar ready, and then maybe even do a solar, so we're, as not net zero, but close to making that all work. So that's a benefit to the community, to the area around. And then this is just approved, proposed. You can see that on one page. You see the different elevations. You see how that all works. A little more care and more love to the El Nido building. And then the west elevation, more articulation of that. I think the ARB appreciated that. And then you have a more lively elevation and get rid of the stone and add brick to be able to set that forth and be able to transition and make all this stuff work code-wise and safe for the fire. And then this is the approved. I didn't show the wall there, but you see it a little more handsome elevation, lighter, and then go from there. So that's our presentation. Simple, straightforward. Again, much needed facility for our community. And I'm here to answer any questions or so here.
One quick comment. David showed the model. Fortunately, we have been able to purchase that model now from Mrs. Gorthy. She decided to sell it to us with the condition that it will be displayed in the facility and she'll be allowed to come and visit that. So we have that at our disposal. I think that will be a great resource for our architect to pick up the fine details from the house.
Okay, we'll start with questions from the commission before we open public comment. Do we have any? No? Yeah, Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the generator.
Yes, sir.
As you well know, this project is directly across the street from single-family residential. And when generators are not a problem until they are. Until they're used and it's noisier than people anticipated. And while I know our ordinance says that you have to hit a certain noise level at the property line, nonetheless, I'm interested. A typical parapet is not going to act as sound attenuation for the generator, and so I'm fine with it being on the roof. That's not a problem in my opinion. But I'm interested in how are you going to attenuate the sound? What kind of materials? And I don't actually need an answer tonight.
Right.
I'm willing to let the staff work that out at the building permit level. But my concern is that once the generator is there, and if it is not properly noise attenuated, when and if it needs to be used, typically they're used for a long period of time until the repair, whatever it is, can occur. I want to make sure that we've done everything we can, since this is a neighborhood, we're not in a commercial area, that the noise is not going to be a problem for the neighbors. And so I'm asking you, please work with the staff, and Cindy, I'm asking you, noise attenuation, and that typically includes a roof, at least over the area where the generator is, to keep the noise inside the box. I know that from some experience, I really don't want to revisit particularly, but please keep that in mind.
Yeah, we will do that, sir.
The other question I had, quite honestly, was about the building materials for the trash enclosure. Again, it's often the case that inexpensive materials are used because it's only a trash enclosure, you're going to be facing San Ramon Valley Boulevard. And even though there's landscaping there, I'm interested in the kind of materials that you use. I think it ought to be a heavy duty cinder block of some sort.
Right. We sort of, you're a man after my own heart, because trash enclosures are, they're treated roughly by our, friends who are trash haulers and everything else. And the only way to build them is in block.
That's right.
And then do that and make it beautiful, but sturdy. We do steel gates that are swung from ballers that are buried deep in the ground, so that it all will work and look good many years from now.
I greatly appreciate that. You don't want any comments right
Not
now?
yet, not yet,
Okay,
not
I
yet.
won't make any comments, but thank you. I
Okay.
like your answers.
Do we have other questions for, yes, Commissioner Edwards?
Thank you. What is the timeline to start construction on this project?
We would like to start spring of this next coming year.
Do you have financing in place?
We are working on financing. I know it's a difficult thing. So it's funny, as an architect, we're sort of jack of all trades, master of none. But one of my things now is relationship with banks, and I bring banks and hard money lenders to developers. So that's maybe somewhat of my gift in helping projects move forward.
I'd like to understand what the financing plan is.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about continuing delays in getting this project underway.
No, I fully understand that. And for us also, we have been at it for over 5 years now. So we really want to get it going. We have been in conversations with 3 banks. And today, this afternoon, we were talking with David and his partner about engaging a couple of other banks. Now, so far, so good. We have received good feedback from the banks. What we have done is, at the request of the bank, we have started a market feasibility study that will be finished at the end of this year, which is a requirement by the bank for the loan. In addition, they are also looking for us to finalize the management agreement with the prospective operating partner. So that's the second element of it. Third element is what David is working on, is finalizing the construction design so that we can give this to get quotes from the contractors. Those 3 elements to put together will be part of our loan application. And we hope to get that done in next 4 months, from December through April timeframe.
Okay, so I just want to be very clear.
Mhm.
At this point, you would not selected an operator. You do not have your financing in place. You have not selected a contractor. And you haven't completed a market feasibility study.
Okay, so can I address one at a time? Our contractor is on the team right now. We have not finalized the full budget yet because the construction design documents are not complete. They've given us preliminary budget, but it will be further refined once we give them the full design. So that's that. We have 2 operators already in line, and our strategy is to get the best terms from whoever can give us. Both of them are equally interested in this project, and they are willing to go extra mile to invest some of their own money into the operation of it. So as far as selection process is concerned, it's contingent upon a number of things. One of them is, I just want to make sure that the market study clearly backs up the pro forma these guys have put together. And I don't want them to paint a rosy picture for me. So that's why there's a process that we want to go through to find to isolate which will be the right operator for us. But both of them that we are talking to have the national reputation. They specialize in this industry. So our banks know who they are, and we have gotten good validation from them. They have already looked at their financials. So regarding the financing, all of these things are sort of interconnected. Financing is dependent on us knowing what exactly are we asking the banks for. And we can't ask that until our general contractors tell us what it would take for them to build this thing, plus what fees that we'll have to pay to the city. No, we haven't gotten those either. So all of those things are sort of interconnected. Once we get all of those in place, and we are hoping to get all of those sorted out by mid-December timeframe, and we'll go from there.
When do you intend to apply for building permits?
We're submitting
December 15th. No, it's 15th of Friday.
December 10th.
December 10th is a Saturday, so it's the 15th. We're done the 10th and we're going to submit the 15th.
Okay, so you're going to submit for building permits before you have your construction contract in place. And before you have your financing in place.
Yeah.
And what happens if you conclude that the project is going to be too expensive? Are you going to be back here in June asking us to revise the project again?
I hope not. I've not anticipated that. And so far, everybody I never consider myself to be Mr. Know-it-all. I always have validation points, right? So my validation points, number one is banks, because they look at these projects and they look at it from their risk perspective. And I think that's the best perspective they provide. So that's my one validation point. Second validation point is the contract, the operators, because they have done this, they do this for a living. They are managing or they own multiple of these facilities. So based on the worst case scenario, what we have presented to them, based on the pro forma we have prepared, everything appears to be in order. Now for funding, we have multiple sources. Our first attempt is going to be with the bank, but there are multiple private equity firms that are expressing interest in investing into this project. So we have multiple options. I'm honestly really not that worried about raising funds for this project.
Okay, I don't have any further questions at this point. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to have a follow-up question on this line of information. In terms of finding a construction company, and none of the paperwork that we have seen has included the means by which this house is going to be relocated. And I think as I looked at this set of plans this time around, I'm increasingly skeptical that the building will withstand the move. And we haven't seen anything that, is going to indicate how you're going to move it. By what means will you be successful in moving it? And to Commissioner Edwards' point, well, what if it just really does fall apart when you get it going? So, I have some concerns about that. I have other concerns that we may discuss in this. And I think it really comes back to right now, is the use of the El Nido house. I have very serious concerns right now of the use of the El Nido house to have residence rooms in it. And I have not heard from you in terms of, I understand new construction, it all comes up to code, but now we're talking about a very old building, literally on its last legs, that you're going to move. And now you're going to have to bring it up to code, and you have to get it reinforced and safe so that you can put people in an assisted living residence. That's not really a question, but I have not heard anything in this proposal. That's a big change for me.
Okay. As far as moving the house is concerned, we have two bids from two different companies. One of the company is the company that moved the David Class house from its original location to the current location. So we have a bid from them, and there's another bid from another company. I forgot the name of them. But we have, so the way it will work is we will first sort of reinforce the walls. They're falling apart through whatever means they will. They will move that house to a staging location. will stay on the rollers until we dig out the basement and build the basement and put the slab on it. And then the house will be removed onto its ultimate location. We recognize that a lot of the interior of the house has to be gutted out. In order for it to be livable and usable for our even administrative offices, it needs to meet certain code. So we are, actually, there is a clear plan and that will be submitted to the city as part of our application. You'll see how we are planning to reinforce it. First and foremost, it needs to meet the fire code. That is a very important element. And without that, we just cannot put any resident out there. So we are very aware of that. Our team, and David can talk more about that, is diligently working on the detail plan. We had a full team meeting this afternoon, just specifically talking about what we are going to do, what kind of treated wood we'll be using. Inside of the house has to be gutted out. It's just in a very, very bad situation. It's just not usable. For us, the focus is twofold. One is to gut out the interior of it and rebuild it. As far as our exterior of the house, our goal is to basically sort of refurbish to the degree we can, or use some new material to fix the broken material, put some new windows over there because all of the windows are broken. Also put a new roof. All of that is being outlined in our detailed construction design documents that will be submitted to the city in mid-December timeframe. I hope I addressed your.
Additional questions?
I don't have questions, but when
Okay.
we get to the discussion,
Okay.
I will,
Let me,
part two.
can I add a point? We've done this a myriad of times, so I know it's sort of like, how can you move this building? I mean, at the corners, you can see the sky, but you wrap it and then you move it and then you go and replace. I mean, there's a barn find and we're going to build it so that when you drive by this house, it looks like it did in 1852. And so that's the transition of being able to really take a part of historical renovation is to rebuild it and take care of it and straighten the floors and do everything. So this isn't anything that difficult. It's just care and love. It's just care and love to be able to do that. But we can provide city staff on this information, how that's done. We haven't figured out how we move it across. It's been done a myriad of times, and more than happy to give a narrative of how we're going to do it and put it in the drawings and have everybody sort of, this is the date, this is how we're going to move it, and this is how we do it. I mean, one of the roles that LCA is in here is to help. So he'll make this and get it built. We don't do things to do art projects. We are architects to build buildings. As Aspen Woods took a little time to get it done up the street here, but that was something to be able to get, low income senior housing. Again, a process to get projects built and get the financing. And we were instrumental with standard companies.
Mr. Walsh, do you have any questions?
I do. I have two areas briefly I wanted to ask the applicant about. Then I'm going to have a question for staff. For the applicant, I have two general questions. The first is, what part of the building is the memory care unit?
The main building will have 3 floors.
Okay, all right. So the assisted care facility will be solely a memory care unit.
Yes and no. So how you.
It's almost like being part pregnant, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, it's so, and I have had very detailed philosophical discussion with the operators. So the early stage dementia people are very much, and I can talk to you with first-hand experience with my mother. They're very much normal. They perform most of their activities and so on with the limited assistance, right? So that will be one set. Then there's one set of tenants we will have. And then we have second set of tenants, which are more in the moderate stage of dementia. And the third will be more sort of in advanced type of stages.
Oh, okay. Well, my question, actually, you answered it about 2 minutes ago, which is that this is going to be completely a memory care unit. That's not a pejorative term. there's at least two of us on the dais who had the same experience that you do. And I raised the question because when I went through the plans for the approved project last spring and compared it to what we saw now, most of the amenities that would be suitable and used by people who were truly assisted care were stripped out. And what was left was the type of facility that I have seen for memory care patients. And so I just wanted to make sure that I interpreted your document. Again, it's not a pejorative. It's just that's the way it is, because it wasn't clear to me until you just said that this is in fact was going to be a memory care unit. This obviously, has some impact on the community, actually in a very quiet way, because you pointed out that memory care units tend to be very, very quiet because A, the patients are quiet, and B, unfortunately, they don't tend to have a lot of visitors. So it's a very quiet facility, but I wanted to make sure of that. The second question I had is sort of the flip side of that. In addition to preserving the physical aspects of the Harlan House, one of the aspects of this project that you have repeatedly pointed out to us is the ability of the city to benefit from the Harlan House in terms of actually seeing what the building looked like back in the 1880s. As I said, I was in the house 12 years ago. I've seen the fact that in the interior is a mishmash of anything. It is A, not representative of the 1880s at all, and B, you earlier answered my question about what was going to be done with the interior. You're going to gut it. And to me, that's the only way that you're going to deal with that. But when you originally came to us in 2019, one of the statements you made to us was, quote, "The house will be made available for scheduled public tours and planned events organized by the San Ramon Historic Foundation," close quote. Now, I know the Historic Foundation is very interested in being able to show the Harlan House to people in a sort of minor league way, as the Glass House is. And your historian pointed that out in the letters that she wrote, the last one of which I will point out was written prior to our looking at the revised plans. And she wrote in her last letter, quote, "The historical house will be used as a facility for dining, family visits, and entertainment programs for residents, which are all compatible with its original use as residence," close quote. And so given the way you've restructured the house itself, and you basically going to gut it, which is understandable, but you're now using the second floor for residences, and that will be clearly off limits to anybody but maybe a family member. And we're using the ground floor for office space. What do you intend to open up to the public in terms of the interior of the house?
So this is exactly what we are working with the interior decorators that are part of our team. Our goal is the ground floor of the house to be designed. So as you pointed out, none of the current artifacts are historical. You have everything that you see in the house currently was probably added in late 50s, early 60s timeframe.
Yes, that's correct.
And historians had noticed that, and they said, none of this is usable. In fact, when I spoke to the Office of California Historic Preservation, they also said the same thing, that, hey, honestly, there's nothing inside the house they think is historic of its nature. Outside is what they're concerned about. With that said, I still am committed to decorate the house with the artifacts from that era, with pictures, window treatments, some furnishing. More importantly, this model that I just acquired last week, that will be now displayed inside the house. So our goal is basically to, through pictures, through coloring, through furnishing, depict the era of when this house was built to the best of our abilities, basically.
I'm
And
sorry, go ahead.
that I would love to allow people to come and visit the office, and to the degree we can make the tour of the facility possible. Again, this is contingent on our partner agreeing to that, our operating partner. We would love to give tour. There's a little bit of pride in here. We would like to show that to the visitors as much as possible. House itself is fairly accessible. We will have security controls so that people from the house cannot go freely into the main building and vice versa. So the controls will be there. People will be able to come in, and through pictures and stuff, they will be able to at least relate to the historic aspect of this house. And that's the best we will be able to do.
Okay, you're getting down to the bottom line here, which is the question is, what is the public going to get out of the refurbished house? And that requires having access to the first floor, which is where your offices are.
Mhm.
And it sounds to me like the best way to describe this is TBD, to be decided.
No, I think we can add in the construction documents, just like we did visual images of the outside. We can add the visual images of the inside, so everybody sees what they're getting, and there's no TBD. It's clearly, these are the pictures, these are things, and they're 3D models, so you can see that the model's already built, so we can show all the information from the
Well,
interior
it's,
design.
it's the last clause in what you said that I was trying to get at, which is they'll see the model, but they're only going to see the model if
No,
they're
no,
inside the
no.
house.
Forgive me. The a 3D model of the architecture, the model, it's the
Okay.
model we built of the building, the computer model, forgive me.
Oh,
The
okay,
computer
okay.
model of the building, and then you will see the computer model of the interiors and with the pictures and everything else, so that we put these in this construction documents now. So you see that staff sees that this is how the house inside is going to look. This is how the house on the outside is going to look. And so there's a peek into the future. One of my employees used to work for Pixar, so you get that look of, wow, you hold up the thing after it's done and say, oh yeah, it looks identical. So that's what we could do to make sure that everybody understands what's going inside. I think always in this project, there's been a confusion where we're going. And so Soheil is not an experienced developer. And this is where I come in to help him through the process, and also with the city to be able to get trust there to understand what's happening.
Oh, okay. Well, let me end this part of it by saying that I think one of the things that needs to be sorted out is to what extent the public's going to have access to the inside to see the type of things you're talking about in the Harlan House. Now, I did have one question for staff. And that is this. I agree with the applicant that the inside of that house is going to be gutted. The only thing that's going to be Harlan House specific for the historical record is going to be the outside of the building. I have seen the outside 12 years ago. We've seen pictures of it. My question is this: at some point, someone's going to have to make a determination whether any part of the exterior is really salvageable. They're going to be able to use what is currently there. Or, as I suggested a dozen years ago, to build a Disneyland reproduction of the house that actually looks the way the house did, but it is a functional unit. Obviously, the latter is not something our historical foundation wanted. And my question to staff is there anything in the conditions of approval or that is in staff policies that would allow the city to have some control over the extent to which the exterior of the building is not simply refurbished or repaired, but it is actually replaced because the existing materials cannot be reused for the type of project that this assisted care facility entails?
Through the chair, the resolution from the May Planning Commission approval Resolution 06-22, there are conditions related to the restoration of the home. Condition number 4 identifies that, and I think this is back at page 76 where it starts. The El Nido house, the El Nido home shall be relocated and restored on site as outlined in the recommendations of the El Nido Historical Study prepared by Brunswick Historical dated January 8th, 2021, prior to final building occupancy. That's one of the conditions, and then the study itself outlines a number of recommendations for the restoration of the home as far as how to materials and the ability to refurbish as the original materials as much as practical. But there's when you look at the attached historical report, there are a number of recommendations on how to restore the home as close to identical to the original history.
No, I understand that. And I read the letter and I highlighted the COA that you just mentioned. And so my question is, who gets to make the call on whether the steps that are being taken to restore the house are sufficient?
So those are listed under planning services conditions. So that would be planning staff that would review that.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Okay, with no other questions, why don't we go ahead and open public comment? Do we have any late communications on this item?
3 late communications were received from Carol Rowley, Sandeep Dakras, and DB Liu, are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. And we do have 1 speaker card from Greg Carr.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This project's been a long time coming. It's nice to see it finally come to fruition with some form that a lot of folks can accept. First off, through the chair, to the architect, I'm sorry to hear about your parents. And then secondly, about the architect, it seems to me that they finally got an architect that can get something done. So to, Corey Edwards is concerned. That's very valid concerns that you have, but this is the first step. Okay. Some thoughts. Being an engineer most of my life, the structure of that Harlan house and its condition pretty much require that, as they're saying, it be gutted out. And when you get in these old kinds of structures, you have to probably see it as something that becomes a Disneyland reproduction. That's just how it is. And of course, you get outside and you have to assess the condition of the skin, the eaves, all the frick-frack stuff on top, and it's probably in poor condition. So that has to be reproduced. So to me, it seems that the best combination of things here is to have it reproduced as they have shown, I think, quite well, especially on their full-scale model, that this is their attempt to reproduce it as it was in 1860 or 1880 or wherever. Something that came to my mind, if you can't use the inside of it, I suspect that that's probably going to be a no-go, just because you got an ongoing, business operation there. You might want to talk to the applicant about setting up some outside garden area in the form and design that they had them in those days in front, that could be used by the public or through the city for some events. And that could be a pretty good alternative towards having the inside available. As to concerns Gene had, they have to go through a permitting process that requires that the two-phase moving is done by an engineer. It has to be approved by the Department of Public Works and whoever they want to have check the plans. So that can be a condition of approval, okay, the COAs, and just put on there the things of concern. Other than that, I think it's a good project. I think you probably have the better head of the team and, the LCA architects. Let's get going on this so that he can get approval. And when he has approval, then he can go talk to banks and have something in hand. He can talk to construction people. He can talk to everyone under the sun, including operators. But he's got to have that as the go ahead. And I think he's there. So I hope you approve it. And if there are concerns that you have, you just place them appropriately and, realistically in the COA. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I received a speaker card from George, sorry.
Good evening, George Addies. Sorry, I don't write it very clearly. It's the handwriting of an engineer, fortunately. So I am an engineer. First, I want to thank the commission. Very insightful questions. Previously, when we did this, I was on the phone, wasn't able to look at you each in the face. I am able to do it tonight. I want to thank you for the questions. Really raised a lot of concerns in my mind, being a resident in the area, having done similar types of projects. As an engineer, one of the very first projects I ever did, the person that was my boss at the time said to me, you know what, if you screw something up, fix it. If you don't, it's always going to be an eyesore forever. This is going to be an eyesore forever. I thank you for your questions. Hearing the questions, and thank you, Vice Chair Edwards, for the questions you asked. It certainly came through to me what a wheeler dealer the developer is. He's trying to pull this whole thing together, at the same time, put up a smoke screen, look how good it looks. We're going to save the building. The building is not savable. Just like Commissioner Wallace, I've been into that house 12 years ago. I've done construction projects. That is ready to fall apart. Nothing of that is salvageable. What he's going to be building is a replica of what's there. I struggle to understand how a business is going to be run out of the building is going to allow tourists to come in there daily to look at the facility. That is not going to happen. And if he says it's going to happen, it's a smoke screen so he can get this thing approved. The whole financing that he hopes to get, he's got nothing. We as residents have been pulled this way, all for one person's greed. When we met with this individual, 2018, he promised us a 45-bed facility. Went from 45 to 60s, now 61. Once he gets all his finances put into place and eventually his business plan, which he doesn't have, what's it going to go up to? 100 beds? How many people is that going to have? What is that going to do to the residents in the area? That it all impacts us as residents, as people that have invested in San Ramon, in homes, raising our children here. The other thing, we've discussed traffic in the past, and I know Commissioner Marks, you said, well, we can park in the streets. I don't know when last you've been in that road. Since the school started up again, the police department have been there almost every day writing citations, people turning in, making turns right where the in and out is of that building. I plead for you to really look at how the traffic is going to be around that building, because we as residents have got to live with that daily. The last thing that I want to bring up, because we are running out of time, I'm struggling to understand, maybe it's an error. I don't know why it's not coming up, but in the resolution that was sent out, it showed that this November 15th meeting has already been held. And I just don't understand how that can be put into the resolution, that this meeting has already been held and things have been progressed from here. Is that correct? And let me see if I can find it and I'll read it to you. Oh, here it is here. It states, so this is the resolution number 10-22. All right. Whereas on November 15th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. So November 15th is today. Let's live in a different paradigm. The commission held a public hearing on the development plan amendment DPA 2022-0016 for the El Nido Senior Assisted Living Facility, received a staff report, took public testimony, and closed the public hearing. It's written in the past tense. As far as I know, we're living in the present tense. Today is November 15th. How can this already have been written into into the resolution. I've not done the rest of it. I don't know what else is in there, but that's the first thing that caught my eyes. Is it an error? Is it something that was done intentionally? Has this already been approved? As a resident, I have concerns about how quickly this is being pushed through. The finances for the project, how we as residents have been jerked around from one thing to the next thing, from 45 beds to 60 to 61. What's next? We have a right to know, and I ask you to plead you to put this guy on the dock, make him show you the books of what he has planned to do there, not just the smoke screens moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I can allow Cindy to comment, but the resolutions are typically written as a complete document. And I can assure you that we have not made a decision tonight. We have not made a motion. We have not approved it. That is the purpose of tonight's meeting.
Sure, I can answer that question. The resolution is provided as a draft for the Planning Commission's consideration. And so if appropriate, the Planning Commission could use the draft resolution this evening for their consideration when making a motion on the project.
Thank you, Cindy. Do we have any speakers on Zoom tonight?
Yes, we do.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and open those?
Jim Blickenstaff.
Okay, go ahead, Jim, when you're ready.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. I got involved here in the beginning of the meeting, and now this is also interesting. And I'm going to reiterate what I've been saying earlier, that to the extent you can, you want to make this amenable to the neighborhood and consistent with the architecture of the late 1850s. And personally, when I see old buildings, glass house or whatever it is, I don't care about, oh, gee, that's mainly fabrication. I just see that piece of history. So for me, it doesn't really matter if it's 80% fabricated or 90% or 93%. It's just kind of attractive memorabilia from that time that brings that time into this era. And that's what's important to me. That's just my example of how I look at it. But to the extent we can make it attractive for the neighborhood, the entire building, I think when financially feasible, let's do that. And for example, the roofing of that time was shake. It's not necessarily allowed today, but it was brown, it had texture, it looked nice. And the roof is going to be very important because right now the roof is kind of just functional. It's just black tile, it looks like to me. And that's not really imaginative. I think with a little creativity, you can have a roof that's more in keeping with that era. The color can be wood, there can be texture to it. It can still be asphalt, but it doesn't have to be such hard, plain flat. So there's examples of doing things that are bringing in that era, making the overall building more attractive and making it more consistent with the neighborhood along with the vegetation, which I appreciate you're doing. So it kind of blends it in and the roof becomes an important part of that. So let's look at feasible things that can make this more attractive for the neighborhood. And the roof comes to mind because there is some option of doing solar panels later. But even if that comes up, you can still have a key component of that roof have some look of the era of that house. And then that blends in the facility along with the Harlan house or the El Nido house. So I think that's the kind of things you want to look at and just be consistent with that era, even if it causes a little more prefabrication than you'd like. I think the key is to represent that era in a way that is attractive to the neighborhood and then represent the facility in a way that is attractive and consistent and compatible with the El Nido house. So I think we want to look at that outside blending in a way that maximizes the visual attractiveness. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have any additional speakers?
No, there's no other hands raised.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment. Commissioners, somebody want to offer their opinion first on this? Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to disagree with some of the comments that were made tonight by my colleagues, and I hope you won't take offense. We're supposed to state what we think, and I appreciate that you did, but I do not agree. I first of all want to say to the applicant that I think the changes in the overall architecture, in my opinion, are well done. And it's a significant improvement over what we saw in the set of plans that we approved several weeks ago. I think that the roof line, the fenestration, and the supporting eyebrows over the windows, the elevation shafts, and the balconies are well done. It may not be exactly what was there in 1888, but the architectural historian has reviewed it and butt off on it, and I happen to agree with that. Where I disagree with my colleagues tonight, and I would ask you to keep in mind, we approved this project already. What was supposed to be before us tonight was architecture. At the last meeting, we found out that because of changes on the interior, there were changes on the exterior, and we did not have enough time to really review them. And the plans were such that there was not a side-by-side comparison, so we could easily see things. And that was really what this was supposed to be about. I feel like we are tonight a little bit off the rails. It is not the purview of the Planning Commission to ask questions about or get information about the financing of a project. We never ask about the financing of a project. I've been on this commission for 9 years. Eric has been here for who the heck knows how long. There's never questions of an applicant about financing. We are in the land use business. We look at land use and related issues to land use, such as site planning and architecture. We take a look at traffic issues and other physical aspects, but financing is not something that we hold an applicant accountable for. Not, at least not to us. Building code issues. There was a comment made about, I'm not sure you can make the upstairs safe. We don't administer the Uniform Building Code, or the California Building Code, I should say. That is a department in the city that will take a look. And if it can't be made safe, it will not happen. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But again, we are not competent enough in the building code, experienced enough in the building code to put an applicant in the position of having to tell us how they're going to make it code compliant. That is the job of the staff. And again, we don't ask other applicants about this. We don't put them through some of these kinds of questions. We made a land use decision, and that decision's been made. What is before us tonight is the architecture. And yes, you can ask the question, but it seems to me unfair to put this applicant through that. With regard to being sensitive to the community, we listened to the community and we didn't agree with them on the land use matter. The comment I made about parking on the street, I asked the staff to take a look at it. I didn't say it was a great idea. I said it was something worth looking at because one of the members of the community was concerned about parking in their neighborhood. And the only way to eliminate that, if there was a concern, if there is an event where there are more cars than parking stalls that are on site, is either park in the neighborhood, which we did not want, or put it on the through street and keep it away from the neighborhood. But I was told by the staff that was not possible, and I did not bring it up again. I did not try and force it on the neighborhood. I thought I was responding to something that they had said they had a concern about. But in the end, we told the applicant last, I guess, 2 weeks ago or thereabouts, come back with comments from the ARB, and we will be ready to then decide whether your architectural changes were acceptable. And in my view, they have met that test. Anything else feels to me, at least, like double jeopardy, and I do not support that.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Somebody wish to take the mic at this point? Mr. Kuznick.
I would respectfully disagree with your baseline. The differentiation for me, yes, we approved the plans we approved in May we looked at in good faith and we made a land use decision. But when this project, when these plans came and I was studying it, for me, it was, wait a minute, this is very different as you are looking at how you are going to be using this building to house senior citizens. Now we know that who are most likely severely memory impaired. I think that that is an important consideration, and it's not just, this is the same project. So in that is my concern. I think that if I was a prospective client and I would look at how this is wed to this old house, those would be some of the questions that I would ask. You know, do I want my 100-year-old father-in-law on the second story of a building that was, you know, 2 heartbeats away from being nothing but termite dust? So I think that's a legitimate realm of questioning, and I don't think that negates what we did in May and to approve this. I do like the new design, but I think it is our responsibility to ask those questions and to make sure that those concerns are vetted, because it's not the same project as what we approved. It is bigger. It has an appearance that is bigger. I generally like the new iteration. I think it's a very smart looking building, to your comments, but I do think it was well within our purview to ask the questions and to reconsider this, not just you know, only architecturally. So that would be my comment.
Comments, additional comments?
Yeah, I've got some comments, and I will say that I largely agree with the comments that Commissioner Kuznick made. I am very focused on the land use aspects of this project, and I have been every time this project has come before us. Perhaps the largest, most important component of this project is the historic preservation of a structure that we have been told repeatedly and urgently must be preserved now, today. It cannot wait. We have to take this project as it comes. We need to approve it because we've got to get this work done right now, right now, right now. I am familiar with historic preservation of this kind. I am familiar with moving structures like this. I'm familiar with the challenges of doing it, and I have been very supportive of this project from the outset. But now we're 6 months later, and a lot has happened in 6 months. But this project seems to be moving backwards. We're 6 months after approving a project that urgently needed to be started. And now we find out we've got no operator, no contractor, no budget, no financing, no lender in mind. The economics of this project have dramatically changed since May. If only, you know, if only when we look at the interest rate situation. We've now got significant massing changes. This physical structure, I do agree, it looks considerably larger than it did in the past. Whether we like those changes or not from an architectural perspective, it feels like a bait and switch. And I fail to believe that these are all operator-driven changes. And I am very dismayed that, having gone through as many hearings about this project as we did, apparently everything we did previously was done without the benefit of having an operator, even like being consulted. The flip comment that we haven't had any detailed philosophical conversations with an operator is offensive. We went through so many hearings and heard from so many people. I would certainly have hoped that the project applicant would have had some conversations with an operator before presenting the project to us. Deep philosophical conversations or otherwise. What I'm seeing here does not sit well with me. It feels like a bait and switch. I do not know if we have a power as a city to break this project into 2 phases, but the cost to move and preserve the historic structure is going to be, to my expectation, a fraction of the cost of building the building. And considering the urgency with which this project has been brought forward, I would like very much to see the city require that the preservation of the historic structure occur now. Not in 6 months, not in a year, not in 5 years when this project gets around to being built. Because the longer that historic structure stands there in the wind and the rain, the less likely we're going to have a preserved structure. I'm also very dismayed to hear that this structure, as fragile as it is not going to be moved once. It's going to be moved twice. I do not understand the concept of moving the house to stage it, but it seems that phasing this as a 2-move process creates risk that is unnecessary and inappropriate. So I'll stop talking at this point. I just want to be very clear about my just real stark disappointment that we are here 6 months after having approved this project that was presented as such an urgent matter. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
For the last, 3 years, I think at least, we've been looking at this project, which essentially is to build an assisted care facility on that particular lot. I mean, that has never changed. We approved the project in May. We don't have any control over when the building gets done or the Harlan House gets moved, but what we did approve was to the project as it was structured at that time, which is the type of building and the type of use of that particular historical structure. When in October, it came back to us, and all of you are correct. The project had changed. The underlying structure of the project, not the building, the project had not changed. It was still an assisted care facility with the appendage of a hopefully to be restored and or preserved historical building. That hasn't changed at all, but the changes were significant enough, certainly from an architectural standpoint, that the commission felt that we needed to send this to ARB and do so in a speedy fashion, which is actually what happened. I think this is on the fast track for ARB as ARB hearings are held. And what came back to us is a project that changed in really 1 or 2 respects. One is the architecture itself changed. And I agree with Commissioner Marks that the architecture changes are an improvement over what was there before. I think the building as structured now is a much better fit for the Harlan House, or at least our depiction of the Harlan House than it was before, notwithstanding the additional story that is going to be added between the house and the assisted care facility that was being built. One of the questions I had from the October presentation, which was not answered at that time, was is this going to be a real assisted care facility in a sense that you had people who could take care of themselves with also a memory care unit? Now, my mother was in a facility that had both, so there is clearly a difference between the two. And I finally got an answer tonight about which one of the two it is. They are basically creating a 3-story lockdown building for dementia injured people. It is an unfortunate fact of life today that as our cohort grows older, some of us faster than others, that many of us will need that type of care. So I have absolutely no objection to that facility being used for that specific purpose. So what it's being used for meets what we did. It's a sort of a subgenre because it's listed, it's limited to dementia patients. The architecture has improved. The question has to do, the only question really has to do is the Harlan House. I have always felt, and I've said this for over a dozen years, that doing any type of realistic preservation of that building was a long shot at best. Having been in it, I agree with the applicant that there is no way that the inside of that building can be used for the type of facility they're talking about. Even when they were talking about having the offices upstairs, that building will not support that. It just won't. And it needs to be gutted because the mismatch of stuff in that building, you would not want people to see. It is, in terms of an architectural history of our area for the era in which it was written, an abomination. And so the question is, it was going to be gutted. And the question I've always had is, since that's the case, what are we really preserving? What we are trying to preserve, and let me emphasize the word trying, because I think this is still a long shot, is the exterior of the building so that people driving by or going to visit people there can see what that building looked like in that era of San Ramon, which is in the 1880s. I don't know, I'm not an architect or an engineer, how much of the present building will be able to be preserved so someone can say, geez, that window was from the 1880s or that porch strut was from the 1880s. I don't know that it's that important because I don't know if it's possible, but I think what we're going to wind up with is what I referred to a dozen years ago as a Disneyland reproduction. And you know what? That's not so bad. If that's what we wind up with as a front piece of a very needed health facility in San Ramon on a piece of property that will support that the neighbors will hardly know it ever exists, I think that's a plus for our city. And so I'm in favor of the project. I think it's an improvement from what we saw in May. Commissioner Edwards is right in the sense that the applicant doesn't appear to have its T's crossed and I's dotted, but that's sort of the risk everybody runs. We don't have another alternative. There is no one breaking down our doors to try and preserve that property. It's been attempted and talked about for over a dozen years, at least since I've been on the Planning Commission. So I would say that as much as it raises questions, this is our last best hope to preserve some aspect of a building that, if it doesn't go forward, it will be a pile of rubble in a year or two. This is our best shot at it. And guess what? The door prize is an assisted care facility we all need in this town. So I'm in favor of the project. I wish we would have moved faster. I wish that somebody from B of A were here to say, here's the check to build it. And here's the contractor who's got the plans for it, but that's not the situation we're in. But I think right now this is the best we can do. That's my thoughts.
Additional comments from the commission at this point? Okay. I don't think I have anything to say other than I'm also in favor of this project. Absent the preservation of the house, which I can agree with Commissioner Wallace, although I might not call it Disneyland, I might call it a Hollywood set. But I think it is going to mimic and look like the house, similar to, I think the barn, that's also been rebuilt. And if I can't touch a piece of wood from the 1880s, I don't think that's my concern as much. I also think that tonight we were really tasked with reviewing the revision to the project because we did approve a project. We approved a memory care, assisted care. It's all under the same zoning code, residential care for the elderly. We did approve it. We did listen to the concerns of the neighborhood. And as Mr. Marks said, we did listen. And in our judgment, as our appointed role, we felt that it was a good land use decision, and we modified the specific general plan to allow for it, and we approved the project. The changes, I don't consider to be significant. I think the architecture was significant, and I do also agree that the outside of the building looks significantly better even than what we approved back in May. So I think at this point, I think the best thing we can do is make a decision and make a vote. I've not heard comments tonight of specific changes that we would like the applicant to consider, but perhaps we'll get through that when we go through the resolution, the conditions of approval. But at this point, I think we need to make a decision. So with that, my recommendation is that we take a look at the resolution and the conditions, or we prefer to make a motion first. Forget the process. We haven't done this in a while. You'd like to make a motion and then we can.
Mr. Chair, do you want a motion to adopt resolution 10-22 so we can therefore have a discussion about the resolution itself?
Yes, please.
All these whereases? Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Now, do I need to put on the record orally the motion?
Yes.
All right. I move that the planning commission adopt resolution number 10-22 of this planning commission of the city of San Ramon approving the El Nido Senior Assisted Living Facility Development Plan Amendment DPA 2022-0016.
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and at this point, we will go through the resolution before we take the vote. Is that mechanics? Yeah, okay. So okay. Packet page 23 is the resolution. Do we see any changes, comments, corrections on page 23, page 104 of the resolution?
You're first.
Sorry. In our fourth paragraph of recitals, we have the word minimal, makes minimal changes to the approved development plan. I would like to see the word minimal stricken. It makes changes to the approved development plan. I do agree that those changes do not result in new circumstances, but I do not view these changes as minimal.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. I have another change.
Okay.
And we really ought to start numbering the whereases. Say I have the fifth whereas on the fourth page is kind of awkward, but I'm going to do it anyway. Second whereas. I would strike out the language after August 25, 2022 as follows, quote, due to a need to modify the building for the operation of the senior assisted living facility, close quote. I don't know that we need to make a finding as to why the applicant decided to do that. I think it's irrelevant to our consideration. I think the operative fact is that the applicant filed the application.
Okay, so to make sure I follow, whereas on October 25th, 2022, the applicant filed a development plan.
You got it.
Okay, I got it. Okay, okay. Got that, Cindy? Okay, okay. Additional changes on this page? Okay, when we turn to packet page 24, page 204 of the resolution. Seeing no looking up, we'll go to the next page. Page 3 of 4. Nobody reaching for their microphone. We'll move on. And page 4, therefore be it resolved. Okay. Turning the page to page 1 of 2 of the exhibit A, the conditions of approval. And Cindy, could you clarify by this resolution does not replace the original resolution. Those are all still intact and all of the conditions of approval that we went through in May are still part of the project. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it is attached as Exhibit B to this resolution to enforce that those conditions remain in full effect.
Okay. Okay, so packet page 27, pages 1 of 2 of the conditions of approval. Okay, seeing none. And then page 2 of 2 was just the follow-up to condition 4. Seeing none. So we've had a resolution, we had a motion and a second. Commissioner Wallace, could I ask you to modify your motion to say as amended at the dais?
Through the chair, if I could also just get clarification, there was a recommendation from Commissioner Marks regarding the noise attenuation. I do have a suggested language if you'd like to hear. We can add condition number 5, incorporate noise attenuation measures surrounding the rooftop generator to reduce noise impacts to meet the city's noise performance standards, period.
That would be fine.
Thank you, Cindy, for catching that.
Okay, so I would repeat my motion subject to the 3 alterations, one by Commissioner Edwards, one by me, and one by Commissioner Marks. I'm sorry, Commissioner Kuznick, you apparently got left out on this one. Okay.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0-0. And thank you very much for coming out tonight in your presentation. Okay, we will move on, and I think Ms. Chamberlain is going to rejoin us at this point, and there she is. Come on down. Okay, item 10.
I'm
public
sorry,
hearing
through the
new
chair.
items. Okay.
Could I just also,
Yeah.
I'm filling in for Lauren today, so I'm a little rusty, but I just wanted to make a note about the decision of the Planning Commission. Decisions of the Planning Commission may be appealed within 10 calendar days of decisions by filing a letter stating the grounds for the appeal along with appropriate filing fees with the city clerk's office. Just wanted to make that note about
Thank
the
you.
previous item. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10, public hearing new items, there are none. Item 11, non-public hearing action items, there are none. Item 12, study session, commission liaison reports and interest items. Why don't we start with the commissioners if we've had any commission liaison meetings recently?
So I attended the Economic Development Advisory Committee, where we received a presentation from the city manager about the economic development and city revenues. Specifics were presented regarding sales tax revenues, business license revenues, and property tax revenues.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Freeman, did you have anything?
The Housing Advisory Committee meeting was canceled.
Okay, so you do not. Yes, so Commissioner Marks.
Yes, on the 9th of this month, I attended the Parks and Community Services Commission meeting. At that meeting, they received the first of 7 parks, the design for BR1A, which will serve the Belvedere or Belmont Village, I should say, senior community, and the apartments at BR1A. The plan was very well received. It had connections to the Iron Horse Trail. It consisted of a large green and pathways around it, a transit center, and then a smaller green above the larger green that was separated by a pathway, if I recall correctly. And interestingly, the applicant, Mr. Engen from Sunset, indicated that he was going to request, and I don't know exactly who he would request, I'm assuming it's Debbie, that the required art piece fees from both projects be combined and placed and used for a art piece or something in the park that is being constructed at the BR1A site, which I thought was a really good idea. I thought particularly for seniors, since walking in the park and sitting in the park and hopefully enjoying the art piece would be a real benefit for them. I thought that would be a good deal. There was a question raised by one of the Parks Commissioners about the role of the Parks Commission reviewing the 7 parks that are proposed for the City Walk project. It was unclear, that person felt that what the role was. Did they have a formal role, an informal role? And since there were 7 parks to be built, they wanted to get that clarified. They requested that the Parks and Community Services Director, Ms. Hyman, take a look at what documents exist that discuss what role the Parks Commission, if any, had, and make those documents available to the Parks and Community Services Commission. Additionally, it was Mr. Engen's recollection and mine that the parks will be sent to the design of the parks will come to the Planning Commission as well. I don't recall that to be exactly accurate, but you're shaking your head yes. Or you're shaking your head no, I can't tell.
No, just briefly, the process does require a private property, so it's a development plan amendment.
Well, that was what I thought, but it had been a long time. Anyway, Mr. Engen didn't seem to have any problem with that. But again, overall, the park design, I think, was very well done.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Wallace, did you have anything?
Yesterday morning, I went to the in-person meeting of the Open Space Committee in the emergency operations room. Nice and cozy. The main purpose of the meeting was to discuss whether Open Space wanted to recommend to the City Council approval of the environmental impact report prepared by East Bay Regional Parks for the Las Trampas area. An EIR that was 600 pages. The only person of which who confessed to have read it was our chairperson, God bless her. The rest of us felt that since we had only seen it a couple days earlier, that the most logical thing to do was to recommend to the City Council at its next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, that they review the EIR and make their own determination whether to support East Bay Regional Parks. This was to the undoubted pleasure of Council Member Armstrong, who was sitting next to me. And after dealing with that weighty issue, Council Member Armstrong and I regaled the Open Space Committee about all the things that both the City Council and the Planning Commission was doing, which is always the highlight of the Open Space Committee meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Okay.
Say, Commissioner Wallace, that I did get over to the public library to look at those documents. And while you may not be inspired to read the full 600-page EIR, there is a much smaller land use development plan that is very readable. And I would certainly encourage residents to stop in and look at it. It's very insightful. And I've really got a lot out of it. So yeah, it is very accessible and lots of great diagrams. And so,
well, it may interest you that at our meeting, we had our usual speaker, Taiwan as a country, who was so entranced by the idea of the EIR that she wanted to have her own personal hard copy. It was suggested to her that maybe that could be done, or it was probably available through other sources. So we'll see if she does read it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. Other staff comments at this point?
We always have comments. So I just wanted to kind of give an update on coming attractions as we always do. On your, I gotta pull it up, I just lost it. So coming up for your December 6th meeting, we will have 2481 Deerwood, which you heard at your about a month ago at your last meeting. And then I think something of great interest to the Planning Commission. Bishop Ranch will be attending the meeting, and we will have a workshop with them following 2481 Deerwood on the Chevron parcel. They like to present their early thoughts and receive comment and input from the Parks Commission or from the Planning Commission. And then they will be proceeding with working with the public and getting their ideas, then probably returning to the Planning Commission at some point next year. So they want to have an early outreach with the commission to gather your input. So that will also be on your agenda for that evening. And then right now we are, while we show no items for December 20th, please let me know if you have vacation plans for that week. We are holding it for the housing element. We have our calls, this Friday, and hopefully things will go extremely well. It's moving forward. We think we're in a real good position, as we've indicated before. If for some reason we cannot make that meeting, you all have been emailed by Amy regarding a special meeting on Wednesday, January 11th, probably a 6 o'clock start for the housing element. So that's all I have. And that should take us through the end of the year.
Okay, anything else? We can go ahead and adjourn at this point?